Hi, welcome to this week's episode of Grooves of Influence. My name is Xavier. I'm going to be your host today. And this week's guest is Bryan. He is a lead singer of the metal band 5 Foot Thick from the Pacific Northwest from the early 2000s. Bryan, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, I'm Bryan. I was the vocalist for 5 Foot Thick from here in Spokane, Washington. We were on the scene for, I don't know, about little, really close to about 10 years and did a lot of touring, put out 3 albums, played a lot of shows, met a lot of people and had a lot of fun. So, yeah,
Yeah, that's the name of the game, right?
that's right.
That's awesome. And so, I asked you the most impossible question as a musician. What is the most influential album to you? And so you want to share a little bit about that album?
There are a ton of them, but to get it down to one, I have to say that it was Faith No More, The Real Thing. It was just such a diverse album. It had a lot of stuff going on, and each song was just a little bit different. So if I had to pin it down to that, that's mine.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you heard it or like your first experience with that album?
Yeah, my friend and I drove into Spokane, and we would always go in and try to find new music. And so we went to Hastings, and I remember seeing that album, and you kind of pick it up and you look at the cover and you kind of read through the song titles, and we'd kind of heard about them, but didn't really know who they were or what it was about. And so we bought the CD and stuck it in the CD player in the car on the way home. And it was just like, it was nothing that, it was nothing like anything that we were listening to at the time. We were really into, Metallica and Megadeth and really heavy stuff. And so to hear this Faith No More, and it had keyboards and melodic vocals, and every song was different. They all sounded different, and each one, and the influences, and it was very refreshing, and it was like, wow, this is cool. So yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it. I mean, just looking at kind of after listening to it, there's rap, right?
yeah, yeah,
He raps. It's of course got a metal, there's metal. It's funky though. A lot
yes,
there's a lot of funky bass lines. I was like, oh wow, the different genres that they were mixing into that album. And there's even that song that almost has like Middle Eastern kind of flavor too.
yeah. And there's some classic sounding guitar, and then like Surprise You're Dead is just like, it's like just almost like, it's that really metally feel. And I don't know, just a really cool. And the thing about it too, you bring up the rap aspect of it. Nobody was really doing that at that time. There wasn't a lot of that around. It came, the new metal influence, and Anthrax had some of that a little bit too with Public Enemy, and but it wasn't mainstream. It wasn't coming. So to mix those influences, it just made you go, wow, that's cool.
And that's something that you included in your own music, right? With 5 Foot Thick. That was something that you guys did.
We did. We jumped in on the new metal thing, and I hesitate a lot of times to say it was really rappy, because to me, I'm not. I never was. I'm not a rapper. It was really more like percussive. It just kind of like, I don't know. It wasn't really planned. It just kind of came out that way. And I think just the way that the music was written, and had that feel to it, where the vocals needed to be kind of that way. And so yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned Surprise You're Dead. Was there any other standout tracks for you on that album that like really just showed you something that you, like you said, that you never seen?
I think like Zombie Eaters was one, because it went from that, like I said, it had that kind of classical guitar feel, and then all of a sudden it just got into that, that really heavy sounding, and it went from like this really almost relaxing vocal feeling to this just right up in your face. And it was just like, I don't know, that's one of those albums too that I don't feel like there's a bad song on it. I mean, Epic was the one that got all the airplay, and, was the MTV music video. I don't hesitate to say, it was a good song. I don't think it was the best song, but it was the most, I guess, the one that could be the most commercial. So I don't know. It was, yeah.
Isn't that funny how oftentimes the most popular song isn't the best song? Like having these conversations with artists, it just never is. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Clutch is one of my most favorite bands in the world. I love them to death. They're wonderful. But the song that got played on radio was, the Jesus on the Dashboard. I don't ever feel like that was their best song. There were so many others that were so good. And I don't know. It's like maybe it has a little bit of something that everybody can like. So it grows to that mass appeal, I guess, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I find that pretty consistent.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, albums I like, I'm like, it's not the best song on the
Right.
album, but
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah.
And in Epic, what was interesting about Epic, I thought was that little piano indie. I was like, well, that's definitely a shift. And like at the end, there's that one sour note. Like they're playing it, and that sour note makes it feel very like kind of creepy a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. That, and, again, that was something that nobody did that at that time. I had a friend at one point in time who was a keyboard player, and he tried to convince me that, you could have keyboards in heavy music. And I was just like, I don't see it. I don't see where you're coming from. And then here comes Faith No More. And it's like, it was right there. And it's like, I can't believe that you utilized that. And it was so like, it just sounded great.
Is there any instruments that you've like in your experience of making music that you've tried to utilize that maybe aren't traditional for the type of music you make?
Not really. We kind of stayed when we made music, we pretty much stayed with what was there, bass, guitar. We did have a guy that did turntables and samples, but that wasn't like cutting edge at the time. There was a lot of bands that were doing it. We did record a song just recently with the band I'm currently doing, Munson, and we utilized some banjo, and it's kind of rockabilly with the banjo aspect to it, and it really turned out really cool. And it was, to me, it was kind of like it fit, and it was kind of a surprise that it sounded as good as it did. And at the end of it, it turned out to be one of my favorite songs that were recorded on this album. So, sometimes it's surprising what just thinking outside of the box will do.
And what type of style is your new band doing?
It's it's kind of hard rock mixed with some punk aspects of it. Really kind of, just I don't know. It's just a lot for fun. And it's kind of what happens when you get a bunch of dads in a room who have played all different types of music. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, man, it's good to stay creative and keep making music. I feel like you have to, right? Once
Totally.
you do it after touring like you did for as long as you guys did, you just have to keep going.
I stepped away from music for a while after 5 Foot Thick ended, and life wasn't really full. I needed that creative outlet again. And so when we started jamming with this band Munson, it just felt good. We're not trying to sell a million albums or play a bunch of shows. It's just really just to get that creative outlet out, so it gives you something to look forward to in the middle of the week. It's like we get together on a Wednesday to go jam, and it's a release of stress and all of the, work aspects and all the things that you do in your daily life. And you get to go play music, and it's just like you get to forget about all those things and just, submerge yourself into, whatever it is.
And it was interesting, you talking about that creative process. It kind of became, it's just a part of who you are. Do you remember when that first kind of, you noticed that about yourself, or like your first song you wrote? Do you remember that?
So the funny aspect of like my earliest remembrance of like writing music was I grew up on a farm. Okay. And I oftentimes was on the baler, and a baler will give you a beat, right? I remember sitting on the tractor, and you've got the engine going, and I remember like singing along to it and making up goofy little things as I'm riding around on the tractor. They never became songs, but they helped like pass that time, because sitting on a tractor baling hay for hours on end is just so monotonous, and it just helped like pass that time, So it was like, so that's like my earliest remembrance of that. But like, as far as like really actually writing songs, shortly after I moved back to Spokane, my good friend John was in a band called Morning Breath, and they had just got done recording a bunch of stuff. And John did a bunch of stuff that was like the regular vocals, and then he did some backing stuff. And he was like, dude, I want to hear those live, so I need somebody to help me do those. So he brought me into the band, and we started, kind of doing the stuff that he wrote in the studio, doing it live so we could have like the harmonies and the melodies and, the backing vocals and all this other stuff. And then we started writing as, the two of us, and it just kind of took off. And so I don't really remember like the first song that we wrote, but I remember that aspect of just kind of, the guitar would start something and the bass would join in and the drums, and then we would just do like a scat vocal where it's not really words. It's kind of more like, phrases and syllables. And then you get done with that, and then you write words to it. And so I don't know, it's a fun process. So that's kind of how I remember it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, there's always a question. I feel like with most artists, I was just having this conversation. It's like lyrics or music first. Like, what comes first, as a songwriter? And so, are you kind of both, or do you typically go the more music route? It kind of sounds like.
I have always been like lyrics later. It's kind of funny because for me, like when we're writing a song, there's a vibe to it. There's something that the song speaks to you, and a lot of times, me personally, I'll write like the chorus of the song first and then kind of write the rest of it around it. And a lot of times, it's as you're, forming those phrasings and, what you're going to do vocally, there's a feeling to it or something that pops in your head as it's coming. And it's like, that's kind of cool. Or, sometimes you end up with it and it's like, well, let's tweak that a little bit and change it around or something. But that's how I've always done it. I know, you talk to a ton of different people, and some people have, you know, books of lyrics and then they just turn it into a song. And yeah, I haven't been able to do that. Ideas, but never really like written out songs.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And so, like, I'm not too familiar with what you do instrumental wise. So, like, what's your process, in a band and the bands that you've been in when it comes to, creating these songs as like kind of more the lead vocalist? Like,
Sure.
what's your role?
A lot of everything that I've ever been involved in is usually a collaborative effort. And most of the time starts with the guitar player. And the guitar player will have a riff in mind or something, and they'll start kind of playing it, and then everybody joins in, and the song kind of starts to structure. You start laying down the verse and the chorus, and then, a bridge and this, that, and the other. And a lot of times I'll just kind of listen to how it's going, and then I'll kind of pop in on top and start putting, what I feel like the vocal phrasing needs to be and kind of play around with it. So my part of it is a lot. It's like I said, it's a collaborative effort, but I kind of allow or let the drums, bass, and guitars kind of drive that. um, That's what drives it. And then I kind of jump in to complete it, if you will. I don't know.
That's interesting. No, that's cool. It's always interesting to hear how different bands operate and different musicians. Just kind of everybody's so different. I mean, when it comes to art, there's no right or wrong way to do it, right?
Exactly.
And so,
Exactly.
as long as the result ends up being kind of what you guys are wanting, that's
Yeah.
what really matters at the end of the
Yeah.
day. Not to go back, but I'm just kind of curious. So, how did you get into metal working on a farm? I have to circle back to that.
That's totally cool. Honestly, my I don't totally know, but I think it was out of rebellion. My mom and dad both listened to, my dad was into country western. He really liked that kind of stuff. And my mom liked Elvis and Kenny Rogers. And I think just like out of the spirit of rebellion, I just tried to find music that was as far away from that as possible. I think the first time that I heard like something that was, I just got into that speed of it and that energy that it had. And it just kind of, it just pulled you in and it captivates you. And it's like, I don't know, that's what us.
Yeah.
It was just a feeling of, of that raw power and energy that, that metal has. I guess.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And it's interesting that you're saying that, except the album that you picked, is so different in that sense that it doesn't always apply, versus like, a Metallica, Megadeth, something like that, where it's like, it's just interesting, how it's probably, do you think it also has to do with, as you kind of grew as a musician and, a music listener, that you kind of started looking for things beyond just that?
I think, see, that is the, the point of what the real thing did for me is it did that. It opened up my eyes to that different aspect of music to where it was okay to be a little bit quirky and a little bit explorative, to go outside of that energy and that rawness that metal has. And it all of a sudden made you kind of look at other things and go, that's really interesting. And it opened my eyes up to like exploring different stuff that I probably wouldn't have, you know what I mean? To where it's like, oh, there's some other stuff out there that also makes you feel that same feeling, and it sucks you in, and and it gets you excited about listening to the next song. And so, like I said, I think that's one of the biggest reasons that album was so influential.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, just for the fact that, like we talked about, it's so diverse in the sounds that they utilized, even the time signatures, the styles, the shifts that they were doing is just very like, there was, what song was it? Let me pull up my notes. There was a song that almost reminded me of Tool. It was Zombie Eaters, that beginning,
Yeah.
that calm beginning, and then they just go crazy.
And then it just kind of, the
yeah.
chorus of it just kind of punches you in the face, and you're like, wow, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Have you ever got into playing any instruments? Have you ever gave it a try, or have you just been kind of content with being a vocalist?
I have recently started playing acoustic guitar, and I'm not very good. but
No, that's
but
cool.
it's kind of fun because I think what kind of started it for me, what made me like want to do it, is that I've always been reliant on everybody else, right? I've been reliant on a guitar player, a bass player, a drummer to write the music. And so having an acoustic guitar, you kind of sit down and you can kind of write your own stuff and, come along to it, or just play. So it's just fun. I can't imagine that I'll ever get that good at it, but it's enjoyable. It's something else to do, and it keeps that creative musical aspect of life for me too. So yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. It's never stop trying new things, right? I mean, you got a banjo in this punk rock metal band, so I can't wait to hear that and see how all that ends up fitting together. So pretty fun. Okay, I feel like this is kind of, I don't know. I was talking to some friends and they felt like they debated it. What did you think of the cover of War Pigs on the album? What's your thoughts on that?
I like it. I'll be honest with you. I was never really a big Black Sabbath fan,
Okay.
going all the way back. Um, so it was kind of interesting to get their take on, like a classic, old school metal song. And then you add again the keyboards and that, that, I don't know. I enjoyed it. I like their rendition of it. I think it was very creative and, outside of the box. And it was, I enjoyed it a ton. Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. I thought his vocals are pretty interesting for that song too. I thought it was just kind of a cool rendition.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I mean, it's just hard when you play. I'm like, I feel like that's so risky when you play
Yeah.
a song that's like that.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
and Faith No More, they're not afraid to do some of that stuff. They did a cover of a Lionel Richie song, Easy Like Sunday Morning, and it's just it to me. It's just wonderful, It's like, and again, that's a risk in itself because I mean, Lionel Richie,
Typically not what you're gonna put together. And,
right?
and it's like the more, I don't know, like the more you start adding stuff that doesn't fit together, you start coming up with some cool creations
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
Like in their last song, I think it's called Edge of the World. It's like
yeah.
almost like an a cappella, like doo-wop type of like night.
Totally.
Like I was like,
It almost has like a poppy feel to it, like
mm-hmm.
pop. I don't know. Yeah. Always that one was always fun at the end of the album. Just you strong to the end of the world.
Right. I was like, what the heck? Like after all, all that
Yeah.
it's been going on to end on something like that. I was like, this is so representative of I think what they were looking to do though. Um, in the world of music at that time, they were just like you said, there's just more beyond that raw energy. There's a different way to, create music that's interesting to listen to, that's beyond, just
Yeah. Well,
thrasher.
and Michael Patton's he's just got such a range and a wonderful voice. And it's like the guy can do anything and it sounds good, I mean, he's in another band, Mr. Bungle, that I adore. I love them. But they do like death metal-y stuff now. And it's like, what can't that guy do?
Right.
Well, yeah.
Well, talking about him as a vocalist and you being a vocalist, is there any like specific aspects that he does or, just nuances in his voice that you've tried to like implement in yourself? Or do you just kind of let him be him and you be you?
It's he's an influence, and it's funny because it's like what he can do vocally, I can't even touch. He's got a totally different style, and I can't touch it, and I wouldn't even try because I couldn't do it justice. It's like what he can do vocally is not what I do. Mine's much more, of that percussive, almost more streamy, not melodic like Michael does, and it's just, yeah, no way.
Do you know what specific things he does that makes his voice, sound like that to you? What makes it melodic? Like, what is he doing vocally
Yeah.
to make it that way?
It's just, like the patterns that he uses and, going very high and then can be able to drop down to those really low notes. And I don't know, he just has a great way of doing it. And it, it is very, like, I have a lot of respect for the way that he does things because they're just, like I said, like, I can't do that. It makes me wish. It's like, man, I wish I could. But then, you know, it's like everybody, you always wish for what you can't do. And it's like, I'm happy that I can do what I can do because, a lot of people have said to me, how do you do it? And it's like, to explain to somebody how you do something vocally is very, it's tough. It's just like, I don't know, and just do it. You
I
know,
know I know asking you that question, I was like, this might be a little tricky. It's
so
hard because it's just nuances in people's voices and the way,
yeah,
they kind of talk and, I think that plays a huge factor, right? What are some other vocalists that influence kind of how you do things, particularly like in the way that you do them? I'm kind of curious.
I think, going into like, I really enjoy the way Neil Fallon from Clutch is. I love what he does vocally, but I'll be honest with you. I try not to emulate anybody because you want to you have to be yourself because if you start taking aspects from other vocalists, then you start to sound like somebody else. And then you get away from that, oh, that's so-and-so or that, I like the idea of when I do something, if, people who know who I am and have heard me before, they're like, that's definitely Bryan. So I like to listen to everything and you kind of soak everything in and you listen to it and go, wow, that was really cool. I should try something like that. But you never want to like steal it. I guess
Yeah. Yeah.
there's
No,
there's a fine line to walk on that where you don't want to sound like somebody else. You appreciate them and you respect what they do. But yeah, so I didn't really answer your question, did I?
no, I think it's interesting. I'm just kind of hearing your thought process around that because I mean, that's a big thing with music, right? I mean, it feels like I don't know, like you got to be careful because you listen to too much stuff, you start sounding like them,
And
and you're like, hey, I've
yeah,
heard this riff before.
yep, yeah, yeah. But like I love one of the ones that really like caught my ear back in the was the band Snot, Lynn Straight. Oh man, just the first time I heard him, I was like, that dude's got that's cool what he's doing. So I could probably go on for a really long time about all the different ones. Maynard Keenan from Tool, I love what he does, but I can't do it.
It's interesting hearing kind of how you talk about it and just recognizing what you can do and,
Yeah,
kind of just trying to be uniquely who you are.
sure.
It's a
Yeah,
big part of being an artist.
you you know a friend of mine always said, you kind of stick inside your box, and it's okay to have your box, but sometimes you want to venture out of it. What you're good at, and so sometimes it's like, let's try adding a little bit of this to it, and you kind of throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And so, but you kind of always, to me, I always kind of navigate back to my box, and kind of stick inside of that.
Keep it
So
safe. Keeping it safe.
it's your safety zone, but in the same sense, it's like, I know that's what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at. So
That's very cool. Well, it's just about time. It's been awesome having you on, man. It's interesting to hear your perspective just on music and, your creation process and what this album did for you.
yeah, yeah,
And so I kind of want to give you the spotlight. I know some of the listeners are going to want to check out some of your music, hear what you got, hear how you rap. No. So if you want to share some stuff for them to listen to, I bet they're going to love it.
yeah. Well, there's all of the 5 Foot Thick stuff is on iTunes and Spotify and all that. So, you know, go listen to that. That was a huge portion of my life, and we had a lot of fun doing that whole project. And I look back on it quite fondly. So, you know, go download it. We still get royalties off of it and stuff. So, and then the new stuff, we just recorded like 13 or 14 songs. Band's called Munson. We're going to be releasing that at some point after the holidays. We're still trying to work through all of the, the little things of, the artwork and getting it all ready to go. But so we should have that out. Yeah, so it'll be out there, just not as of yet.
Yeah, no. So make sure you keep up to date with them, guys.
Yeah,
For sure, you got to give them a listen when it comes out, because we're gonna have to hear punk with a banjo. So not.
yeah. That one's a rockabilly type of
Yes,
song. Right?
yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Really appreciated it. And
Thanks for having me. This has been a ton of fun. Kind of a little bit of reminiscing, past life and things that, and it's always fun to talk about music. So thank you.